I think I'm live. Here we are, season 2, episode 1 of Live from the Drum Room. Very exciting stuff. You guys thought I forgot about you, didn't you? Not quite. Not quite. I'm excited because my old buddy Steve Smith is here. This is the first time I've done this, actually. I've got him waiting in the waiting room. Who knew I had this technology all this time right under my little finger? So this is exciting. Steve's patiently waiting. Good to see some folks here. I figured we'd give you guys a chance to kind of get settled, get in your seats, in this virtual little get together. So I got 2 computers going so I can try to read some comments. Rich, Aaron, Jim. Hey, happy belated birthday, Jim. Okay, so Anthony, good to see you, brother. Los in the house. Okay, the gang's all here. Look at this. And Jeff Allison. All right. I'm going to get Steve in just a second. Going to try to squeeze a whole lot of stuff into about an hour. And first of all, I hope everybody's doing well and staying safe and staying sane. It's been a crazy summer. I know for a lot of people, it's been a pretty good summer for me. Spent some time on Martha's Vineyard, which we do every year, not as much as we normally do, but had our grandkids down for 3 weeks, which was great. That really made the time special. So let's see, what else can I tell you? I'm going to have Danny Seraphine on the show on this coming Wednesday, September 2nd that's going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern time, 11 a.m. Pacific time. So mark that down. That's this coming Wednesday, September 2nd. I can't believe we're in September already. And going to try to do these more regularly. A couple of quick reasons why I hadn't been doing them over the summer, mainly on the vineyard. The signal is very sort of sketchy, the internet connection rather. So, I didn't even really want to try to get too into it down there. I did one, if you might remember, I did a Ringo broadcast on Ringo's birthday, his 80th birthday. But I just figured I'd wait till I get back here pretty much. And as you can see, we're moving house. All of my drum sets, except for one, are in the new place, which is very exciting too. And in the coming weeks, I'll be doing stuff there. So anyway, that's my 62 Gretsch round badge kit right there. Pretty sweet, huh? All right. Anyway, you guys are waiting for Steve, so I'm going to bring him on in. Please give a big hand for Steve Smith. Let's try it again. Please give a big hand for Steve. Hope I didn't lose him. Here he comes. Smith.
Hello, Johnny.
Hi, Stevie. It's good to see you.
Yeah.
Looking good. Looking fit as a fiddle as usual. Fit as a fiddle from your groovy pad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be spending the whole summer in upstate New York. Awesome. Very nice place to be right now.
Yeah. Yep. Especially if the people watching this, which we have a lot, by the way, Steve, if they could see your house, they'd really know how sweet it is to be spending time up there. But we don't want.
This is pretty much the whole thing. I'm in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then there's the dining room, and then the fireplace, and then the living room.
Well,
it's just a little house on a lake, so yeah. It's not a big place or anything. 950 square foot footprint.
From the pictures from the outside, I seriously thought it was much bigger. I really did. I thought it was.
Downstairs, we had to build on the same footprint because it's so close to the water.
Yeah.
Of what was here before, and we did put a small second story on, but it's comfortable for Diane and I. Yeah. And then there's enough room across the street. There's a garage, and above the garage is an apartment, and so of course when the kids and grandkids come, they can hang there, and that's where I have my practice room here.
Cool.
Because
yeah.
What one of the things I've been doing while sheltering and, you know, and staying off tour is putting together videos each week from the practice room.
Yeah.
And I started out in Southern Oregon, where we also live in Southern Oregon, started out in my practice room there, and then changed locations to the practice room here. So that's why some people might look and they go, what, does he practice in every room of the house or something? Because the one here, you know, it's like beds and bunk beds, and, you know, it's set up for kids and grandkids. So,
Yeah.
but I got my drums and a practice kit in there, and I go and I bug the neighbors for a couple hours every day.
I know how that goes.
Yeah. You're
Hey,
doing
Ralph.
the same thing, right? You're
Yeah.
bugging the neighbors too.
I seriously, you know, and we live in this condo and
Right.
like a townhouse setup, and my stuff is all up on the third floor. I was just saying before I brought you out that I've moved all my drum sets except for just this one Gretsch kit. And my neighbors are so great. I mean, they, you know, I'll come out after playing for like an hour or something, and I'll see them outside, and I'll say, I hope that wasn't a bummer, you know, like, no, it was, you know, we can hardly hear it, and, you know, it's not, we love it. And
Yeah. So I have to say my neighbor's been pretty cool too.
yeah.
Gotta appreciate that. So
Yeah, that's a big plus. Absolutely. Plus,
yeah, I
you
mean,
know, I mean,
when I was, of course, first growing up and practicing, I started out in my bedroom, and then I ended up in the basement, but that seemed to like rattle the whole house.
yes.
So my dad had a tool shed in the backyard, so I ended up in the tool shed.
Yeah. I
But
want to
that
hear
was
about that too.
away from the house, and that worked out. That worked out pretty good.
Well,
And
I made a note of that tool shed, Steve, because I remember you telling me about that years ago, and that I'm going to jump ahead because I made a couple little notes here. But when you were at Berklee
right.
and you had met Vinny there, you met Vinny at school, and you guys used to come back and practice in your tool shed, right?
Yeah, well, actually,
Or
we
play?
did some of that, but mostly when we practiced, it was in my parents' basement in Chatham
Oh, okay.
on the Cape.
Yep.
So how we met is actually, we didn't meet at Berklee. We met in Brownsville, Pennsylvania. So I was on tour with Lynn Bibiano. Who's a fantastic trumpet player, mainly a lead trumpet player. And he played with Buddy and Maynard, and then he had his own band in '74, and I became the drummer in that group. And we did some touring in the summer months. And that summer we played in Brownsville, Pennsylvania, in a big barn, you know, some kind of barn that had concerts. And after the gig, Vinny came up and just said hello and introduced himself. And he was, you know, a kid just out of high school.
Yeah,
And
he was 18.
I'm
Yeah.
going to Berklee next year. I heard you're at Berklee. And then that must have been July or something, you know. So then September, I went back to school, and I was in must have been my third year.
Yeah.
You know, third year of Berklee, because I'm 2 years older than Vinny. And then he came in as a freshman. So then that's how, you know, we met, and then compared notes we were both studying with Gary Chaffee. And then we compared notes, and we were basically studying a lot of the same material. So we practiced together, but we had so much fun doing that. We went to Gary and ended up taking a group lesson. So instead of each having a 30-minute lesson, we had an hour lesson together.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And then I don't remember the reason, but Vinny's mother moved from the Pittsburgh area where he grew up.
Yeah.
And she moved to Hyannis on the Cape.
Right.
So of course he was there too. And my parents have a house in Chatham. So we would just hang. I recently found some pictures of he and I hanging out in my parents' basement.
Oh, I'd love to see
That have
those.
never been. I sent them to him on his 60th birthday. I don't think they've seen the light of day since that.
Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah,
great.
it's pretty funny.
And that you told me this story too. I think I don't know if it was Vinny or you. I think it was you told me that when you met him that time in Pennsylvania, that he actually like helped you pack up your drums. Like you guys, he's like, can I help you pack
I
up your
mean, I was
stuff?
my own roadie,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
was
so
a
cool.
kid, I was like 19 and he was about 17 and
Yeah.
I was just a kid, packing up my drums and he gave me a hand packing them up and putting them on the bus. And the bus in those days was like a Greyhound.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was just literally a Greyhound bus with 14 guys and in the drums underneath the bus. So it was
Wow.
those were great times and essential for learning and growing and getting music, developing musicianship and getting
Yeah.
experience playing live gigs.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
A friend of mine, David Foster, used to work for the band Beaver Brown, from the New England area, asked me to ask him about his Normandy. Ask about his Normandy.
Okay, Normandy Sound.
Oh, Normandy Sound. Okay, yeah, of
I
course.
think that's what it means, right? It was a recording studio in Rhode Island.
Rhode Island. Okay,
And I did the first two Vital Information records there.
got it. Okay,
So there was in the earliest incarnations of Vital Information, Tim Landers was the bass player, and
yep,
Tim's from Brockton, and he had done some recording, around the New England area and knew about Normandy Sound, and so he recommended that would be a good place for us to make that first Vital Information record. We ended up making the first two records there. And it was a very good studio, a great engineer named Phil Green. And
yep.
and one of the things that made it a good studio for us is it had an apartment with I think with bunk beds and so we could just live there. We
Yeah,
could live
yeah.
there for like a couple of weeks and make the record.
Perfect.
So
Yeah.
that record was made in 1983.
Wow.
I had just finished the Frontiers tour with Journey.
Hmm.
So we did the album, we did Escape, then we did Frontiers, we did a big tour, and then maybe I'm getting the timing of it wrong. No, you know what? I did the record, I think, before the Frontiers tour, but I did the album and then did a Journey tour and then did a Vital Information tour, my very first one. Anyway, so we went, I think it was in January 1983. I'd have to look at the credits, but, and it was it was a great lineup because Tim played bass. He and I had known each other since we were high school students.
Wow. Yeah.
We were both playing in the Bridgewater State College big band as we got recruited to the college big band as high school students, along with the sax player Dave Wilczewski, and he was the sax player in the first incarnation. And then we had Dean Brown on guitar and Mike Stern on guitar.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all, lived in in this apartment at Normandy Sound and
Wow.
made the one record. Then I did a Journey tour. Then the record came out in the fall, and then I did a Vital Information tour. And then right after that tour, we went right back to the studio to make another record because we had written enough music while we were on tour. So yeah.
Crazy times. And you squeezed in some Zildjian days too. I remember in '83.
Right.
That was when all that started
In
happening.
Chicago, we did the one in Boston
Yep.
with Vital Information.
Yep.
And that was a pretty great lineup of drummers, including Steve Gadd and
Vinny.
Vinny, Larry London.
Yep. Louis
Brad
Belson.
McDonald played with Steve.
That's right. Yep.
Percussion. And Peter Erskine, his band played and Vital Information played. And he had a really great band. It was very close to the Steps Ahead lineup, I remember.
Yeah. Yep.
Like he had Will Lee and Don Grolnick and so that was pretty great. And then I squeezed in. I remember Vinny said one really funny thing at that Zildjian Day, and I don't know if it's on film, but he said he was so nervous. He'd rather be standing naked in the middle of the San Diego freeway than doing that clinic. Do you remember that?
I remember it. Absolutely. I do. I remember it. Yes. Yeah.
It was like one of those lines you never forget. It was so funny.
And it was, it was him like being so honest, like, I'd rather be standing on the San Diego freeway naked. Like, oh God. Yeah. That was a great day. That was it. And I remember for me, and I think for a lot of people, Larry London was the big surprise when he came out, first guy out. And I'd never heard of him. And then, I'd heard his credits and I went, okay, so I've heard him on a lot of records, obviously. And then when he played, it was like, wow.
Super chops, like great groove and amazing chops. And that's, I don't think anyone expected that.
Yeah, that was great. Well, and
then there was another Zildjian Day that I did the Zildjian Day in the afternoon and then played a gig at the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago with Journey, like right after.
Vic just posted that on Facebook the other day on your birthday. And
oh, cool.
Happy belated birthday, everybody, in fact. To Steve, everybody should know it was your birthday. I think they know that, but he posted a picture and I think he commented on that, the Zildjian Day that you did during the day. And Lauren Wheaton also said, we must have played a couple of nights there for Steve to have done something during the day. And then
that's true.
He said,
good point, because we would play 2 or 3 nights at some of these places.
Yeah. And I think we've already sort of touched on it, but for people watching, if you didn't pick up on this, so Steve was born in Whitman, Massachusetts, which is not far from where I am right now, here on the South Shore of Boston, and grew up.
About 8 miles from the Zildjian factory. In fact.
Right.
One time I figured that I just looked it up. It's pretty damn close.
Pretty damn close.
Yeah.
Pretty damn close. I think they used to advertise it that you were like a mile away. You grew up a mile from the factory. They take those kinds of liberties, Steve. I can't. Okay. Yeah.
And actually, just to be really, really super clear, I was born in the Brockton Hospital, and then lived in Rockland for 2 years.
And you were a mile from Zildjian.
That's even closer to. And then my parents, when I was 2, they moved to Whitman. Okay,
so that's good. See, that's new information. That's vital information, in fact.
It is vital.
And technically, Zildjian's address is really in Rockland. They have a Norwell zip code, but they're really.
See, but they weren't exaggerating.
No, they weren't. You really were a mile away.
Yeah. For 2 years, anyway.
Yeah. So so you were part of like a scene when you grew up. Like I remember you telling me that you knew Bobby Chenard, and I knew Bobby. He was the drummer. Everybody, if you don't know who Bobby was, rest his soul, he played in Billy Squires' band, and he grew up in Brockton, Mass, which was next door to Whitman. And you guys were sort of rival drummers, right? In a funny kind of way, like.
I guess you could, something like that.
But when you're kids, the way you're rivals.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Here's how he was in a band called Utopia, not related to Todd Rundgren.
Yes.
It was a horn band. So it was a band, and there were, that was a thing in those days, like Chicago.
Yeah.
And of course, happy birthday to Danny Seraphine.
That's right. Danny's birthday yesterday.
Yesterday was his birthday. And a lot of, so Utopia was a cool band because they had horns. And so they would play, that kind of Blood, Sweat, and Tears in Chicago. And what I really remember that Bobby Chenard played that he excelled at was Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah.
Like sing a simple song.
Yeah.
He was super funky and groovy, and most people know him as like a more Bonham kind of a player, and he was, but he was well suited for that kind of playing. So he was, and so they played at my high school dances. So I would probably a senior in high school, like 1971, 1972, and Utopia with Bobby Chenard would be playing at the dance. So I was just standing in front of the band watching the band, and there was one of the guys, a trumpet
Did you
player.
fold your arms too? Did you do this?
His what?
Did you fold your
Yeah.
arms and kind of look,
Just like-
say, I can do that? No.
There was a guy from my high school band in the band. Paul Huska was a trumpet player, and he was in the band. So he was kind of like a rock star in our school because he was in the Utopia, and then they played the dances,
Oh yeah.
and he was cool, and I just enjoyed hearing him play. And then I lost, I didn't. We casually met and knew each other, and. But then again, I don't remember the exact year, early 80s, I get a knock on the door, my Holiday Inn door. And it was Bobby Chenard with a pack of cigarettes and a can of Coke. And he just, hey, Steve, we're on tour together. And then we just hung out, and so Billy Squire opened a bunch of gigs, a bunch of shows.
That's so cool.
So we reconnected in the early 80s and, toured together and hung out and had some good times.
He's a great guy. He was a sweetheart, man. He was, I'll just tell you a quick story. I didn't really meet him, but the first time I saw him play was in 1974. He was in a band called Orphan. You might remember these guys.
Yeah.
They were sort of like a sort of a country rock. And my sister's ex-husband's brother-in-law, this guy named Dean Adrian, was in the band. So I was like 13 going on 14. They took me to a club to see him. They had a record out, more
Right.
Orphan than not. And Bobby blew my mind because he definitely had, by that time, he had kind of developed into more of a flashy drummer. And, it was the first time I'd been in a club and saw like a live band, and it was amazing. And I told him that story years later, and it blew his mind. He's like, I can't believe it. It's so funny.
Too much.
Yeah. So, so you played in some local bands around the South Shore, or?
Yeah, like during my high school years, I did a little bit of everything. And I got into the Musicians Union. And so then I could do gigs. For instance, there was a for lack of a better description, like a circus band, like a concert band. And the band used to play in the gazebos in the Whitman Town Park or the Abington Town Park, and you have to wear somewhat of a uniform, and I played snare drum and sometimes bass drum, like just standing up playing the snare drum and reading music. And so that was, 1971, 72, still in high school. And then immediately after high school, I still did some of those. There's actually a recording. I have a record of one of those. And so I was doing that. I was playing in the Bridgewater State College big band. So that was one of my favorite things to do. I loved big band and would go see Buddy Rich when I could.
Yeah.
And all the big bands, and actually. But I also played in some rock bands too. And I was in a band called Clyde with some good local rock players. And I think we were based in Hingham. Like the main songwriter, his name was Peter Mall. He played keyboards and he lived in Hingham. So we'd go and rehearse. So we'd rehearse in Rockland, the guitar player and the singer lived in Rockland. So, and we did Battle of the Bands and we'd play some dances and things like that. Yeah. And
regular kind of stuff that was happening at that time. And there was like bands everywhere.
I played rock just kind of intuitively. My focus was on jazz and big band, but I played rock and it was a natural thing to do. It wasn't like a stretch, and I didn't say study it or anything. My studies were more like jazz oriented. Yeah. So what I say about that, and from retrospect, it's more or less the archetype of the drummers from that time, like, like Mitch Mitchell or Ginger Baker or those guys that grew up with jazz drummers as their favorite drummers. And if they took lessons, which most of them did, it's probably a jazz-oriented teacher, because in those days there was no such thing as a rock teacher.
Right.
It was just like jazz. If you were a drum teacher, you were essentially like a rudimentally trained drummer or a jazz trained, or some kind of combination of both, which my teacher, Billy Flanagan, was somewhere in the middle, like knew all the rudiments and taught the rudiments, but had played in big bands and was teaching in that style. So that's why, in a way, those, myself and those early drummers, they sound so jazzy, jazz oriented, because that was the kind of the orientation. But then you played the music that you grew up in, the time that you're living, you play that music. And so it comes out sounding like it sounds.
Yeah.
And the other thing for me, then as soon as I got to Berklee in '72, that's when I really opened up and got hip to small group jazz. And I was really into big band, but I hadn't listened to John Coltrane and Miles Davis with Tony Williams. And so I got exposed to that from the teachers and from the other students when I went to Berklee. And then, of course, the front line of what was going on in jazz at that time was fusion.
Yeah.
Well, later became fusion, and what we called at the time just jazz rock.
Jazz rock, yeah.
We go see Tony Williams at the Jazz Workshop, or I saw Billy Cobham at Paul's Mall, the main two clubs in Boston. And so all of that, influence came into my playing. But anyway, you were talking about just playing local gigs. And so I was playing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And even I was playing, before I had my driver's license, my parents would drive me around to rehearsals. And, it's a story that's been told before, but I'm fortunate that I had real supportive parents that did that. And then we'd have band practices at my house. Yeah. Okay, my first band was called the Roadrunners. And we played music from Herb Alpert and the Tijuana Brass.
Cool, yeah. Probably late 60s, early 70s?
68.
Yeah.
I think 68. There's a picture of me playing with that group. And, we played, Taste of Honey and all those. And my parents even took me into Boston Garden to see Herb Alpert. And I remember the year, it was 1966, because the opening act was Sergio Mendes in Brazil '66.
Wow, man.
And that was, of course, probably the first time I went to Boston Garden.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of different music that I liked as a kid, all kinds of different.
I just think it's, a lot of this stuff I really never asked you. We never really talked about it. And I sort of wondered, I was thinking about it over the last couple of days. I kind of know your story from John Luc-Ponty onward, Berklee, and then you left Berklee you got the gig playing with John Luc-Ponty, and then you left Berklee.
Right. Yep.
And you did that for about a year or so?
I did it for 13 months. Yeah, just a little over a year. Yes.
Yeah. And not to skip over that, but so when you joined Journey, was Ainsley dismissed, or did he leave the band himself?
They.
And did you audition?
Okay, no, I didn't audition, but okay, I had played with Ronnie Montrose.
Right.
Just, to put the pieces together, I auditioned for Jean-Luc Ponty I was in my 7th semester at Berklee, and it had pretty much just started. It was October, I think, of 1976. And Jeff Berlin who was a bass player, a buddy of mine that I played with a lot, he was in New York. He had left Berklee and was living in New York, and Ponty asked Jeff to help him audition drummers. So the drummer that was in Jean-Luc's band right before me was Mark Cranny.
Oh, okay.
So Mark Cranny did an album with Jean-Luc called Imaginary Voyage. And they were getting ready to do the tour. And Mark up and quit, like right before the tour. And he joined Tommy Bolin's band.
Yes.
Which was ill-fated because Tommy Bolin died shortly after that. But Jean-Luc needed a replacement for Mark Cranny. And so he had cattle call auditions in LA and New York. And I got in on the New York auditions because of my buddy Jeff Berlin, who was playing bass at the audition. So I drove down to New York and did the audition and got the gig. And, you know, it was like 7 or 8 drummers in the hallway. And I'd say I got the gig for, you know, a couple reasons. One, I could read music, so I could sight read his music. I sight read Imaginary Voyage. No mistakes. It's pretty hard, you know, it's not like super easy, but I was, you know, I could read and I could play in odd time signatures. And you know, that wasn't totally unusual in those days, but it was enough that it got my foot in the door. So you know, then I had the tough sell to convince my parents that I was going to quit school.
Like you're that close to graduating,
But I did, you know, so I did, and it turned out to be a good decision. And then I ended up, you know, that was like October, November, December of 76, then into 77, you know, we toured. And then I made the album called Enigmatic Ocean in the summer of 77. And then by the end of that year, Jean-Luc wanted to change, and he let me go and Daryl Sturmer and Jamie Glazer. And then he later called us all back, but you know, he liked to change it up. And then Casey Sherrill came in on drums right after me. And so then I moved to LA because I was still living in Boston while I was living at my parents' house, you know, because I had an apartment in Boston, but I was on the road so much I gave it up and just went back to Whitman. And then David Wilczewski and I drove to LA in 1978. January 1978. It took us a long time to get there because there was a big blizzard pretty much across the whole.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
And then I started doing auditions. I ended up getting a gig with Ronnie Montrose, who was the rock guitar player of the band Montrose, but it was an instrumental rock group, him playing instrumental rock, and he was that group was the opening act for Journey on a 3-month tour. So that's how I met the guys in Journey. So in a way it served as an audition, so to speak, because we were, you know, we'd be hanging out and I'd hear them play every night and they'd hear me play every night. The opening act was Van Halen.
Wow.
It was Journey's first tour, Steve Perry's first tour. They had the music from Infinity and then they played some of the more instrumental stuff. Because you know it was their first headline tour, but the interesting juxtaposition was we were playing like 1,500 seat theaters and 2,000 seat theaters, which were the same theaters I was playing with Luc-Ponty. So in a way, that's how popular fusion was in those days.
Yeah.
But that's where Journey started as a headliner, because they had been together about 5 years, but mainly as an opening act.
Right. Right.
So this was their first headline tour. And basically at the end of that tour, they asked me to join the band. They wanted to change. Steve Perry wanted a different kind of groove in the band. And they could see that somehow I had a rock approach, and I was playing more like fusion drums with Ronnie Montrose. You know, it was a continuation of what I did with Jean-Luc.
Yeah.
Because he was sort of modeling himself after Jeff Beck, Ronnie was in that period. So he did like a fusion type of drum. Like he said to me, he wanted a Simon Phillips kind of drummer, you know. Yeah, so so that was the concept, but somehow the guys in Journey could see that I could discipline myself to play that music, and what had more, let's say, of an R&B-ish underlying groove, which is what Steve Perry was looking for to support his vocal style, which is very gospel R&B oriented, coming out of like Jackie Wilson and Sam Cooke.
Yeah.
So somehow, like, that's in a way the magic to me of the Journey sound is it, puts together rock instrumental virtuosity with kind of an R&B underlying pulse with that gospel bluesy R&B vocal on top. So they let Ainsley go.
Yeah. I thought that's right. And I think he, Ainsley, he's as, open and honest as.
Here's the thing about Ainsley. It's like when I did an interview with him after we were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I said to the interviewer, look, I'm really happy to be here. And this came out of nowhere. And I'm very pleased to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But this guy really deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Pointing to Ainsley. I mean, because he actually played with Jimi Hendrix. He was one of the drummers that auditioned for Hendrix, and it came down to him and Mitch Mitchell. And that's in Mitch Mitchell's autobiography. And then, he played with John Mayall, and then he played with David Bowie, and he played with Frank Zappa, and then Journey, and then after Journey, Jefferson Starship.
Right.
And Whitesnake.
Whitesnake, yeah.
I mean,
Yep.
So the guy has the chops and a great career, really great career.
Really great.
And,
really great. I was just going to say, so you joined Journey in '78.
Yeah.
And the first record you made with them came out in '80? No.
It was Evolution.
Evolution, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe
that would have been '79.
'79, okay. Yeah. That has Any Way You Want It and
No. That's the one like hit was Love and Touch and Squeezing.
Oh, okay. I thought they were on the same record. Okay, those are separate albums. Okay.
Yeah, so that's Evolution, and then Departure was the next album, and that has Any Way You Want It on it.
Okay, and that was a year later. That was probably '80. Yeah.
Yeah, we were making a record a year. We toured for a long time, like seemed like 9 months out of a year. And then we'd spend 3 months making a record and then go back on tour.
Yeah. What a cycle. Yeah. I mean, that's
it was too much. In retro, it was just too much, but it was what bands did in those days.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, we should oh good. We're good for time too. I don't want to take too much of your time. Because I could have you talking here all day, but
sure.
But I'm going to jump ahead just for 1 second because
is Bob going to join us, Johnny?
He is going to join us. He's in the waiting room, so I'm going to bring him on in a few minutes.
Oh, he's in the waiting room.
Yeah, he's in the waiting room.
There's another Herb Alpert Tijuana Brass fan.
Oh, Rob is? I didn't realize that. I hope he's watching this and he's checking it out. By the way, Jeff Hamilton is watching.
I couldn't hear from the waiting room. I couldn't hear what was going on.
Well, if he's on Facebook, he's able to see it and watch it. But Jeff Hamilton is watching, and I said hello to Jeff.
Hey, hi to Jeff. He just had a birthday too.
Yeah. And Therese DiMuzio.
Oh, hello, Therese.
The daughter of the one and only Lenny DiMuzio, who Steve and I were talking about off camera.
Right.
Because you have to talk about Lenny off camera.
You can't talk about him on the camera.
But we'll tell some Lenny stories too. But I was just going to say, so this brings us to 1981 Escape, the one that just blew everything wide
then
open.
then it was Captured.
Captured. Okay.
Yeah.
Captured. And what was that also in 81? No.
3 records came out in 1980, and I'm pretty sure it was Departure, captured. And then we did this pretty cool record called Dream After Dream that was for a Japanese movie. And we went into the studio in Japan and just watched this movie and made up some music.
Wow. Okay. I'm embarrassed to. I thought I knew all this
Not
stuff.
many people know about that record. It's pretty obscure, but it's kind of cool. It's
Yeah, I'll bet it is.
record. So all those records came out in 1980, 3 of them. And then 1981 is when Escape, we recorded and Escape came out.
Gotcha. Okay. And Peter Erskine, by the way, is watching too.
Hey, Peter.
So got to be on our best behavior right now.
So Peter remembers me from, from high school days when I'd go see Stan Kenton's band. And then I went to the Stan Kenton camp for a week where he was teaching. And
that's pretty, yeah.
And he was 18 and I was 18.
Yeah. How about that?
I know. But he was way, way ahead of me. His musicianship was really highly developed at a very young age. From a lot of it from going to those camps, according to, talking to him. He went to those camps when he was very young.
Right. Yeah. But I think it's just so cool that the roots to you and Pete and like Vinny go back and Casey go back that far. It's just, I've always loved that.
Well, and the other drummer, there was a couple other classmates. We had John Robinson, JR.
Of course, JR, yeah.
He was there. Kenwood Denard. There was some drummers that never became like household names. It was, good players, but not everyone became, let's say, well known. But a lot of very good musicians.
Yeah.
There was a drummer named Doug Florence, who I'm still in touch with.
Yeah.
Who is really, we all looked up to. He was such a great player, and he modeled himself in those days after Dave Garibaldi. So he really sounded very much like how Dave sounded in those days.
Yeah.
Which was, super advanced drumming. Like Dave just developed this style that was so beautiful, based on history and tradition, like, the James Brown drummers and Bernard Purdie and, that kind of background, but then had this Bay Area influence and like he and Mike Clark shared some interesting vocabulary. And there was this whole scene that was happening there. Before I got to the Bay Area, there was this scene, but Dave was a huge influence because of his really beautiful playing that he came up with in those early years.
I was going to say, I mean, when I finally got hip to his playing Tower of Power, it was like so beyond my limited vocabulary at that point in my life. I loved it, and I couldn't imagine like process, playing it, because it was just so off my sort of, rock background,
Absolutely. Yeah.
It was all those little inside little things that he plays. I mean, it still plays so beautifully,
He does.
Yeah.
He does.
Monster player. Well, should we jump ahead to the Charlie Watts story, because it sort of relates to Escape?
That's okay. What do you want to? You brought Charlie to see my group Jazz Legacy.
Jazz Legacy. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and so Jazz Legacy was a band that evolved out of Buddies Buddies.
Yeah.
So Buddies Buddies being a group that we played a lot of the music associated with Buddy Rich, but with a small group. And then that group turned into Jazz Legacy. And the concept of Jazz Legacy was to play music associated with a lot of the jazz drummers that I loved listening to.
Right.
So, we did some Buddy Rich music, but we did like music that Philly Joe Jones played on, like that he played with Miles, or music that Art Blakey played, or some music that Tony Williams played and Tony composed, or Elvin played, or that Elvin composed. So it was a super fun band for me as a drummer. And it was a great band with Andy Fusco on alto, Walt Weiskopf on tenor, Baron Brown on bass, and Mark Soskin on piano. And we were touring, and we were playing at Regatta Bar, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And
Can I set it up a little bit? Can I just set it
Yeah,
up for
go.
1 sec? So, and then I'm going to let you tell the story because it's one of my favorite stories. And I want to say hi to the guitar player in my band, Paul Gianelli, who's watching, who's you met when I brought the band to see you a couple of years ago in Worcester.
Oh, right.
Grand Theft Audio, my old buddy. So he's enjoying this. But anyway, so I'll just quickly back up. So I was on my way home from the Modern Drummer Festival on the train, and I got a phone call from Charlie. And this was on the Monday after the weekend festival in New Jersey. And Charlie says, we're rehearsing in Boston tonight. Would you like to come? And they were rehearsing at Agganis Arena, which is part of Boston University, like a 5,000 seat arena that they had rented out. So, and I'd gone to a rehearsal years before at the Boston Garden, so I kind of knew the drill. And I said, sure, I'd love to go. And I got home and I basically just ran back out to the rehearsal. And while I was there, it was the night before you were playing at the Regatta Bar. So I said to him, tomorrow night I'm going to see this. And they were playing 2 nights later at Gillette Stadium. So this was like the Monday night they were rehearsing, night off Tuesday, and then their gig Wednesday. So I said, tomorrow night, Steve Smith is going to be in Boston with his band Jazz Legacy. And I said, it's this band that pays tribute to all these great drummers, Buddy Rich, Elvin Jones, Roy Haynes, Tony Williams. And he's very interested. And I said, it's at the same club I took you to see Brian Blade and Joshua Redman at the Regatta Bar. And he said, yeah, I'm interested. He said, can I bring Tim Reese, who's the sax player in the Stones,
Right.
who I think you know, and he was Greg Bissonet's roommate from North Texas State. So I meet Tim, and of course he knew all the same people. So, and he knew who you were, but he had never seen you play. He said, I said something about, Steve Smith. He said, well, I've heard of him, but I'm not really familiar. And I said, well, I really think you'll love this, So anyway, fast forward to the gig, shows up. We get it, we're sitting at a table. And I just want to tell everybody, because you won't say this. Steve is amazing every single time you see him. But on this particular night, I don't know, you were just like the heavens opened up and you were everything you went for. And then some other things you were getting, and not showing off, but just like, it was so on fire, the show.
But we had just played at the Modern Drummer Festival.
Did you play at MD Fest? Okay, I didn't remember
2006,
that.
was it?
Yes.
2000?
It was 2006.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And Danny played that year too, I think.
And Hudson filmed it, and that's
okay. All right.
That band is in my DVD Drum Legacy, Standing on the Shoulders of Giants. But so we were on tour and we were doing a lot of gigs. So
yeah,
so we were in it. We were deep into it. So. Yeah, so that it would make sense that we were playing at a high level and the music was really happening.
Really happening, yeah. And Charlie was sitting, who's not a guy that's very animated, sitting in a seat, just like shaking his head and smiling, going like,
yeah.
Wow, like it was so funny to watch. So do you want to tell the rest of the story? You want me to?
So you're saying like backstage, so you brought him back afterwards.
Yes.
And and I met him, and I'm not sure exactly how you want to tell the story, but he said to me, because I don't remember how it all came out, but I told him that I met him at JFK Stadium, right?
Yes.
Okay.
He said, it's great to meet you. And you said, well, we've actually met before.
Right, because Journey opened for the Stones in '81 at JFK Stadium in Philadelphia.
Yes.
And he and Bill Wyman came to our trailer to say hello and introduce themselves. They were very, very nice. And I told him that. And then that's when he said, what? You were in Journey?
But didn't you tell the part though where Steve Perry said, we want to thank you for making Escape #1 in the country?
Did I tell him that?
You did, and
we got booed real bad, really bad.
Booed, and he apologized. He said, "I'm so sorry," and then he said, "You were in Journey,"
Right.
and you went, "Yeah."
Oh, and then his next question was, "Were you that good? Were you this good then?"
Yeah, yeah.
Right? And I said, probably not.
Probably not. It's one of the, yeah. It was just a moment in time that I'll never forget because he was
Classic.
doubly like just, yeah, he was floored. He's like, wait a minute, you were in, like, he just couldn't believe that the same guy that he had seen, yeah. So
That's funny. No, that, and so then, then my association with him continued because we live in New York also, right across the street from the Beacon Theater.
yes, yeah.
At 74th and Broadway. And Diane and I were walking around the Beacon Theater and there was all these Rolling Stones road cases.
Yeah.
There was nobody playing there. So I called you.
Yeah.
And I said, I think the Stones might be inside. Can you hook me up? Right? And you called Charlie's Tech or something.
I call Charlie's Tech. Yeah. Yeah.
And they came to the side door, opened the door, and we went in and watched the Stones rehearse in an absolutely empty Beacon Theater. There was like 4 or 5 people in the audience, including Diane and I. And then Charlie came out and said hello. And this is right after, not long after that.
Yeah, that's right.
And then invited us to stay the next night where they were recording what became the movie Shine a Light.
Right, that's right. Yep.
And so we went to that show and it was an amazing show. And then I don't know when, a year later, he called me up and invited me to the premiere of the movie.
Yes.
And unfortunately, I was in Oregon and that was in New York. And he didn't give me any warning. So it was like, it's happening tomorrow. So, but then it turns out then he came to see Vital Information when I played at Ronnie Scott's in London. He came to the show and we hung out. He saw me in a totally different kind of, more fusion environment. And then my last encounter with him is I was playing with Vital Information just a few years ago. Not that long ago, in Minneapolis at the Dakota.
Yeah.
A really beautiful club in Minneapolis. And I had gotten there the day before I was going to play, and Tim Reese had put together a gig at the Dakota.
Right.
And Tim got a hold of me in my hotel room, and he said, "Look, if you come down to the gig, Charlie will come down, and I really want Charlie to come down, but you have to come down." And it was his birthday. I think it was Charlie's birthday.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I said, "Yeah, of course I'll come down." So they sent a car over for me, and I went to the Dakota. And then and Lowell, who runs the Dakota, he says, "Well, I'm going to put you in Prince's booth." So it was this like little private booth in a balcony above, and we sat and hung out for the night, listened to the music, and then we both sat in.
Oh, that's so cool.
I played a tune with Tim's band.
Yeah.
So that was super fun. That was really, really fun. So, yeah. So thanks for hooking us up.
Oh, come on. Yeah. You kidding? 2 of my heroes. And you, I think you sent me a picture. I was on a cruise. I think I was I remember you sent me a picture of you and Charlie sitting together. Right. And you said, look who I'm with. Or so you texted it or emailed it. And I was in like St. Petersburg, Russia on this ocean cruise or something. And I'm like, oh man, and I think it was 2015 because they were on tour that summer and I saw him like in July of that year or something, but
right.
But anyway, that's
what a beautiful man, what a gentleman. Of course, a great drummer and just is the heartbeat of that band.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And, so he's always a pleasure to spend some time with.
Yeah, he sure is. He's special. I was going to bring Rob in, our friend Rob Wallace, the owner of Hudson Music, and we'll bring Rob in just a minute. I mean, there's other stuff too I wanted to talk about, but I know we're getting up to be about an hour. I was going to have you maybe tell a buddy story. I'm assuming you must have met Buddy at least a couple of times in your.
Actually, no. I did meet him, but it was really brief, and it was just like shaking hands and having a photo taken.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I can tell you, like the first time I met him, and it was in 1968, and my parents brought me to the Boston Globe Jazz Festival, and my mom just like, and I was in junior high school. And she just says, let's go back and meet him and get his autograph. And I was like, no, you can't do that. But she did it.
She did it. Yeah.
I don't know how, and I just remembered he was nice and signed an autograph. And then the only other time I met him, I was on tour. That Journey tour I was talking about but I was playing with Ronnie Montrose.
Yeah. Yep.
And I did my first drum clinic for strings and things in Memphis.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I remember those guys.
Yeah. And Big Dave Patrick.
Yes.
Who now lives in Santa Cruz, but Big Dave Patrick was the head of the drum department. He said, I'm going to go see Buddy Rich. And it was an off night for me. And Ainsley heard about it and Steve Perry heard about it. And Steve Perry being an ex-drummer, and Angel, we all went together.
Cool.
So Big Dave brought us to see the Buddy Rich band, and then somehow he got us backstage.
Of course,
so there is a picture. I have a picture of me and Ainsley and Buddy and Big Dave, and Steve Perry was there, but he got cut out of the picture somehow.
I won't say anything.
And Buddy just looks like he's got a cigarette and he looks like really distracted, like just like I'm gonna get on the band bus. I've had enough of it.
I got to tell a quick Buddy story. I had a similar situation. I went to see him for the first time in 1979 with a friend of mine that studied with Alan Dawson. Really good drummer. And I took a couple of lessons from him, who's a very shy guy. His name was Fred Klein, grew up in Melrose, the town that I grew up in. And he called me, it was like a Monday afternoon, said, Buddy's playing tonight at Arlington High School. Mm-hmm. So we went together, and it was, I think it was a last minute thrown together kind of thing where he had an open night. And as I said, Fred was a shy, sort of quiet guy. And during the intermission, he said, come on, let's go backstage and see if we can meet Buddy. And I'm like, what? No, we can't do that. And we did. We go back, and it's like your typical auditorium where there's like a little corridor, on the side of the stage and a door. And we go in, and in the room is Armin, Lenny, and Buddy. And I didn't know who they were. And he said, that's Armin Zildjian, that's Lenny DiMuzio. And I'm like, oh, wow, cool. And we go in there, and I asked him to sign my program, which he did. And I hope I have it somewhere here. And then Fred, who again, I'll say again, was a pretty shy guy, goes up to Buddy, has him sign his program. And he said, Buddy, can you recommend any books on syncopation? And Buddy says, syncopation's up to you. And he said, but can you recommend any books like the Ted Reed book or any other books? He goes, syncopation's up to you. And we ran out of there like a scene from The Wizard of Oz, Rah!
Right.
Anyway, but it's a funny thing where your mother, said, come on, let's go see if we can meet Buddy. And you're like, we can't do that.
Right.
Yeah, we can't do that.
Like my mom, what?
Yeah, I know. That's funny. All right. Let's see if Rob is still,
yeah.
All right. I'm going to bring Rob in real quick. And you got a few more minutes, Steve, to hang out?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right. And here he is, our good friend, Rob Wallace. Good friend to everybody.
Hi, Rob.
Connecting. Here he comes. Here he is. There he is.
Hey, fellas.
Hi, Rob. How you doing?
I'm great. How you doing?
Good to see you, buddy.
Yeah,
Good.
time, Johnny. Too long.
I know. We'll have that call this week too. We'll...
Yeah, let's catch up. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Rob.
I didn't want to barge in. I texted Johnny. I said, you guys are it's such a good zone. I want to sit back and listen to the stories, forget this, And
I'm putting you back in the waiting room. Click. No. I thought it would be cool to have both of you guys. I mean, just knowing the history of like Steve and all the things that you guys have done together with Hudson, and, you know, between books and DVDs and, you know, everything, I just thought it would be kind of a cool thing to just get you on here, maybe just to talk about some of that stuff for a minute.
Sure.
Yeah. And the weddings and bar mitzvahs, we do it.
Well, you know, the first thing that comes up for me is all of the Hudson products, in a way, like their genesis is very organic. It's just like an idea will float, or like Rob will come to see, like you came to see one of my clinics where I was talking about the history of drumming, and you said, why don't we document that?
Yeah.
You know, and all of them, it's not like we get together and think, what are we going to do to come up with a product? It's just we're hanging out and we're talking about ideas, and then a good idea will come up, like, you know, about documenting guys playing brushes, or, you know, whatever the ideas are, they seem to come about organically, and then we'll harness the idea and turn it into a DVD or a book or something. But they all start with just the idea that we love music, we love drumming, and then something develops out of that.
So I can, you know, I agree 100%. And I you know, when you said that, it made me think of the time we were having lunch on the Upper West Side at that restaurant you loved with Diane.
Fairway.
It wasn't Fairway. It was the other place further north. And Andres Ferreira was with us.
Oh, he's on right now. I can see Andres.
Peace food.
And we were sitting there, and you started talking about how you were working on your grips, and you picked up a fork and a knife. You like did this, you know, the whole, you know, and that was the genesis really for the Pathways of Motion, you know, book. I mean, first we were doing some drum guru lessons for that, and then we realized there's too much stuff here, and it's such great, you know, content that we turned it into the Pathways book.
Exactly. Yeah, I remember that cool. Lunch.
That's
cool. Yeah.
I mean, I just feel so blessed that, you know, all these years. I mean, Steve, what year was the first one? Was it 87?
Well, then we're talking DCI. We're talking the DCI. Yeah, the DCI video and the Steve Smith part 1 and part 2. That was, you had made some videos at the Collective, and you did the Steve Gadd
up close
video where you were in the studio,
right?
Where we famously called out Steve because you thought like something happened funny with the time, and he was like, "No."
I don't know if I know this story.
That is like one of those great moments.
I said, you know, didn't that feel a little tentative? And he said,
no.
Oh my God, I never heard that. Oh my God.
Oh really? It's in that video.
We left it in. He totally called me out, you know.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
But you wanted to make one that had a little more production, right? So we came up with, you know, my first video, Steve Smith part. It was supposed to be like a 40-minute video, but I ended up with a lot of material. So then it became part 1 and part 2, and we recorded it at NFL Studios in Philadelphia because they had a whole TV studio set up. So that was the beginning of like DCI taking it up a notch technically.
Right.
Yeah.
That's yeah. They would let us use the studio, and when they weren't out, when football season was quiet, you know, they had a lot of rooms to fill and there was no football stuff going on, so they would let, you know, rent us the studios. It was a pretty cool place down there.
Wow.
Yeah, that was 1987.
And yeah, I remember, you know, coming up to your house, you know, outside of San Francisco, and that was kind of the first time we really met, I think.
Right. Yeah, that's when I used to live in the Bay Area.
Yeah, Novato. Yeah.
Yeah, Novato. Yeah, that was the first one. But anyway, yeah, it's been, you know, what's really interesting when Johnny sent the message and said, you know, maybe you could talk for a few minutes with us. You know, I didn't really know what I was going to say, but it kind of, you know, I kind of started thinking back to all the different projects we've done, Steve. And, you know, there's a very cool arc to them. And it's almost like they were planned out because they've really, you know, sort of one almost leads into the next. And
Yeah.
like Steve said, it's really organic. But when you look at the whole body, and I don't even know how many there are. You know, there's you know, quite a few books and the old DVDs and everything. But there's a really cool arc to the content, and I think, you know, part of it is probably mirrored in Steve is so studious and practice out. I'll tell one quick story. I know you guys have been at this for a long time, but, you know, I think a lot of it is what Steve is kind of focused on at that point in time. Like the Pathways of Motion book, when he was trying to figure out different match grip positions because he was practicing for Journey. So he's trying to figure out, you know, economy of motion, how can he get a little more power? And I think, right, Steve, that's how that whole project really developed in the restaurant with the fork and the knife. But the one story that I've told this, you know, to a bunch of people, it was many years ago. And Steve we were working on a project. I mean, this could have been 15, 20 years ago. We were working together on a project, and I knew he was in Europe for a couple of weeks, and I knew the day he was getting home. And I didn't call the night he got home, but I called the next morning, and I knew he was getting in that, you know, the previous night he'd been away for 2 or 3 weeks. And I spoke to his wife, Diane, and I said, I'm really sorry. I know Steve just got back, but I just have one question. You know, I forget what it was. You know, we're hung up on something. I just got to run this thing, you know, by him because maybe we were editing a video or something. And, you know, I knew it was like 10 o'clock in the morning where he was. And Diane said, I'd be happy to, Rob, but he's practicing. I said, yeah, last night. I said, so, I mean, did he at least open the mail? She said, no. And it started, at that point, I threw up my hands. I said, another planet, you know?
Oh, you were afraid like you're calling too early. Is he still sleeping? Is he,
Seeing his wife like for 3 weeks, he's downstairs practicing, you know.
Oh, that's too funny. Well,
I finish a tour, and then I got a lot of ideas that I want to work on. So.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, that's awesome, Rob. And that's I was thinking, like, I started thinking about when I was still working at Zildjian, and you guys at Hudson were nice enough to have me on the sort of the promo list, and I'd get all the new stuff when it came out. And I was just, to your point, I mean, there was a period of time where, like, and Steve, you would tell me this, we get on the phone or something, and you tell me, I'm working on this thing with Rob. And I mean, there was just like so much stuff coming out, really good content and like educational stuff. And I just thought it was, in case people haven't seen this or weren't aware of it, I just thought it would be kind of a cool thing while we have Steve here to talk about it, and even point them to you, Rob, you know, to Drum Guru or Hudson, wherever that stuff lives. And if people are interested, you know, because it's.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, but I'd much rather be hearing these Charlie Watts stories because.
Well, I know. I was just going to say that to finish that, we're all finding ourselves with a little more time to do reading and studying and practicing these days. So, but I got while I have you both here, and Steve, this goes back to the Zildjian days we did in 1990. You might remember there was like a kind of a run of about 5 or 6 Zildjian days in the early fall of 1990. And you came to the one in San Francisco, but you didn't play at it. But right. Vinny was on the bill that night, and as was JR and I think Ralph Humphrey and some other guys. Hunt Sales, remember him?
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that's when Vinny told us, like in a very private hang at the bar that night afterward, that he had an invitation to play in Sting's band. Like this was like September of 1990. that he was going to either, I think he wasn't even auditioning. I think he had been like asked to come and play with him in New York or something. So there was that. But then you played at the one at Zildjian Day in New York. And do you remember that one?
Yeah, vaguely.
At the Ritz. I think it was at the Ritz. Was that a club?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a theater. Yeah.
A theater. Okay. Dave Weckl was on the bill that day as well. And I think you played with a band or one of your bands, Stephen. You played a version of Fire at the end of it and solo, Jimi Hendrix Fire. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember. I loved that tune and would play it occasionally. Yes.
That was we all felt that was one of the greatest drum solos and performances any of us had ever seen you at that time. I mean, again, one of those nights where you just like hit on every cylinder. But the funniest part was you went out to dinner afterward at an Indian restaurant overseeing Central Park, this place called, you guys might remember it. It's Kenny Aronoff, Tristan Bowden. I think you were there, Steve, I thought. And Rob, I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds familiar, but it's kind of a hazy memory, that one.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Well, bunch of us go to dinner at this Indian restaurant. Kenny gets up on the table after dinner and he's like standing on the table in his cowboy boots and, you know, Kenny being Kenny. We go back to the bar we were staying at the Mayflower Hotel.
Yeah.
On Central Park West. And Lenny and Armin had opted to not come to dinner. They just decided to hang back at the hotel. We get back to the hotel. It's a Sunday night. The bar is basically closed. Lenny's behind the bar playing bartender. And he's like, and he's mixing drinks for people. And I'm going, Colin and me and Mike Morris and a bunch of us get back there and we're going, what's going on? Lenny's like, Johnny, what are you drinking? Vodka tonic. And he's mixing drinks. Security people come down and they basically, you know, tell him he has to leave. We have to leave. And he's walking out with a couple of bottles to take back to the room. It was just, it's a non sequitur kind of story, but it was one of the funniest memories of Lenny. And it was so classic.
The mayhem that would happen after these events, especially.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. That was when we talked about that for a long time, that one.
It was a different time and a different era, really, you know, and I just feel blessed to have been a fly on the wall for a bunch of it because it was unbelievable. Some of those after NAMM show dinner hangs and after the hangs were just incredible.
Incredible. I mean, the stories, you know, everything. It was just, you know, Lenny'd get out the spoons or he'd maybe have his banjo with him and he'd, you know. Do you guys remember how he
played the banjo? He was actually a pretty good banjo player.
He used to play it at the Christmas parties. Yeah, he was a darn good banjo player. He could sit there and, you know, we'd travel together to NAMM shows or PASIC and he'd come on the plane with his banjo in his case, like on the plane. And it was just, oh man, he was, you know, like you said, Rob, it was such a special time.
One quick classic story is Lenny took us out to a Chinese restaurant, me and Vinny Colaiuta and a bunch of endorsers, and we went to a Chinese restaurant in Boston, you know, and it was supposed to be a dinner on Zildjian. And then something happened.
I know the story.
And he didn't have a credit card.
They only took cash.
And basically couldn't pay the bills. We all had to, they only took cash. That's what it was. They only took cash. So we all had to pay the bill.
And
it was a moment.
Yeah, and Colin told me,
fellas.
yeah, exactly. And I think, or Vinny told me this story too, where Lenny was kind of giving the waiter a hard time during the night too, just like kind of razzing him a little bit. And then when the bill came, he took out his Zildjian card and they said, no credit cards, cash only. And Lenny's negotiating with the guy and in typical Lenny fashion saying, well, this is Steve Smith and this is Vinny Colaiuta. I'm with the Zildjian company. Can you just send us the invoice and we'll pay it? And the guy's like, no, it doesn't work that way.
It was great.
Oh man.
He must have been sweating because he loved to be the host. You know, Lenny just loved to you know, keep everybody happy, you know, and the food and drink flowing. So he must have really sweat that one out.
He probably did. As much as he could ever sweat anything out.
Yeah.
So
What's
Rob, the hat you're wearing, the American Drummers Achievement Award, right?
Oh,
Which was a, you know, a great Zildjian event that honored Max
Yeah.
and Louis and Elvin and Roy.
Roy, yep.
Right. Yep.
And my job was to take care of Freddie Gruber.
Oh boy.
I remember.
I got the assignment because, you know, Freddie could corner you and just, you know, talk your head off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think Lenny gave me the assignment.
I think so. And I think specifically.
And you got Freddie and just take care of him.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
and you know, and so, you know, we had a really great time, but basically it was to keep him from dominating a conversation with Roy or Elvin or something.
Yeah.
So.
Especially getting the pictures. We wanted to be sure we could get a great shot of the four of them and Armand, which we did end up getting. But
Right.
you know, Freddie could very easily walk up to those guys and be in the picture, which wouldn't be the worst thing. But we wanted to come away with, you know, a press release quality
Exactly.
of those guys. And but you know, I know it was Freddie. Talk about another
character.
Yeah, what a character. No, we're lucky to have, you know, and I mean, we're all still here, but I mean, during that time, you know, to have known these characters, as we call them. Rob and I talk about this a lot.
Yeah, unbelievable. Yeah, unique characters.
Yeah, yeah. I had another quick funny story that I forgot, but yeah, it's okay. I'll remember it for part 2, Steve, when we do this next week.
All right,
so.
part 2 sounds good.
One.
No, I was going to just quickly, Steve, while you're here, I was going to ask you to, and again, it's so disjointed with what we're talking about, but I'd made a note about Bryan Adams' Heaven, which is, I think, one of your greatest, complete left turn from what we're talking about right now, but one of your greatest drum tracks, like for like a power ballad in the vein of you know, all the Journey stuff that you had done. And can you just quickly talk about how that came about?
Sure. Journey was touring and Bryan Adams was the opening act. And it was a tour of, I don't remember how many months, but, you know, so many months. So when you tour like that with other bands, you usually get to know the guys pretty well.
Yeah.
And you know, Bryan was a really nice guy, and all the guys in the band were really cool. And you know, I had good memories of just sometimes I'd be on his tour bus hanging out, you know, and you know, we'd be in the parking lot kind of watching people come into the arena and stuff. And then he'd go out and do his thing, and you know, he was great singer, and I liked the music. And so he had written that tune, co-written, you know, with his songwriting partner, and they in the middle of the Journey tour needed to record it for a soundtrack.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
It wasn't like part of his album yet, you know. It was just a one-off soundtrack. I think the movie was called One of a Kind or some, I don't know. I actually can't remember if that's right or not. But anyway, and he used Mickey Curry in the studio as his studio drummer.
Right.
He used his regular band, but the drummer that he had, Nick LaRocca, he didn't use him in the studio. So he had Mickey Curry, and they went to the power station and they were starting to work on the song. But as far as I know, then Mickey had to leave early, and he didn't have time to finish the recording because I think he had a gig with Hall & Oates and he had to like split in the middle of the session. And Bryan knew that I was in New York with a day off, and he just called me and he said, you know, can you come down and help us finish this track?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I got in a cab and went to the power station, and Bob Clearmountain was the engineer, and
Yeah.
he had his drum set there. You know,
Oh.
I just walked in and played what was there. So it was a Ludwig drum set that I think had a like 24-inch bass drum, like 2 rack toms, 2 floor toms, and Bob Clearmountain tuned it himself. And
No
he would
kidding.
come out in between takes and tweak the toms and whatnot. But they had that big sound like I was getting, for instance, like on Faithfully or something. And
Exactly,
that's what they wanted, you know, that kind of approach. And so I learned the tune and maybe, you know, made a little cheat sheet and then we just started going for takes.
Wow.
And
You know, I always assumed it was your drum set because it sounds like your
It does,
big
yeah.
Sonar sound and Faithfully. Yeah.
right, I know it does have that sound, but it was Clearmountain's personal Ludwig kit. And one of the things about his miking technique, he put a Sennheiser 421 on the top of the tom and the bottom of the tom.
Wow.
He put him out of phase, but he wanted to get a really huge tom sound. So
Interesting.
he would mic
Wow.
both sides of the drum. And eventually, you know, we got a good take. And then I remember he had me just do some more fills, play some more fills that I think they eventually, like they might have put some in, you know, cut some, they splice, you know, it was like 2-inch tape. So they actually would splice some towards the end of the song, maybe on the fade out, they spliced in some.
Well, that big fill that you do, that sounds like it's live within the track. We go,
Yeah.
da-da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da-da. That wasn't.
No, I'd say 95% of it was just played with the band live in the studio.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I say that, like I think like this last fill in the fade, that might have been something they spliced in there. Yeah, but the tune itself, no, we just played it. So yeah, I was thrilled.
Yeah, I'll have to give it a listen.
And he sent me a gold and platinum record, which is pretty
That's sweet.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And our friend Steve Orkin gave us the name of the movie One Night in Heaven, I think is what I saw. I think that was the name of it. Thanks, Steve Orkin. And thanks, Steve Orkin, for helping promote today. A Night in Heaven, it's called. Yeah.
Okay. All
That's
right.
the perfect
I'm not
song.
sure. I don't really remember that.
All right. Well, Steve, I know you've been here for almost an hour and a half, so I don't want to hold you up too much more or cut into too much more of your Saturday.
Yeah. It's, well, no, I'm having a blast, but whatever you got. I am going to start making dinner soon.
Okay. No, that's cool. I'm going to see if there are any quick questions here I can throw at you. And I know that.
All right.
All right. Let's see.
I'll sign off, and you know, I don't want to interrupt. Let me sign off. Say goodbye to you both. I love you both madly. I
Love you too, Robbo.
And we will catch up soon.
Sounds good, Rob.
Sounds good, Rob.
John, take care, Steve. Say hi to Diane, all right?
I will. Thanks.
All right. Take care, you guys.
See you, Rob. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
See you soon, buddy. All right. Let's see. There's a lot of comments. I've just been letting them all build up here, Steve.
All right.
Is there anything you want to talk about that you're working on right now? Or
I want to mention a couple things. Like,
Birdland. Yeah.
I did go on tour with Vital Information, you know, right before the whole COVID thing really shut down the music industry. And so I was touring, and one of the gigs that I played with Vital Information was at the Drumeo Festival in Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah.
And they video, you know, they recorded that show, and that just was released. So it's a nice documentation of Vital Information, and you can check it out. There's a whole 60-minute show, and it was a great event. It was, you know, in the spirit of the Modern Drummer festivals and, you know, the festivals that we used to have, and not everyone played with a band, but, you know, there were a lot of bands. So it was pretty cool. A lot of great music happened. So
Yeah.
that's and then the other thing I just want to mention is basically every weekend I put out something from my practice room. You know, I have a series called From the Practice Room. So it's whatever I'm, you know, working on, and I make a solo or something. I have an editor, Christian Grissat, who lives in Nice, France, and
Wow.
I film myself with 2 Zooms and an iPhone. And then I send him the files and he edits it into a nice video.
Package,
And we've been working on this one thing. Like I've recently started working on the Wilcoxon book again, which is something I went through when I was a teenager, Charlie Wilcoxon books. And I made a video of one of the solos called Rhythmania a couple weeks ago. And a lot of people are responding. They really liked it. So I really got into it. So next weekend, I'm going to be putting out some long videos about it, about how, working, I call it working with Wilcoxon. So there's like a 15-minute video that I'm going to put out. And then the next day, part 2 I'm going to play a tune called Paradiddle Johnny. I don't know.
All right.
Paradiddle Johnny. And I play it like on my pad, and then I play it on the kit. I play it at 4 different tempos. So kind of demonstrating like starting to learn something, getting it a little faster, and then playing it up to tempo.
Yeah.
And then there's like some outtakes, so that'll be coming up. And that's on my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, everything.
Incidentally, when I play with my band, Grand Theft Audio, I play every song at 4 different tempos. Anyway.
That's some doing. Takes some doing.
It comes naturally, Steve. It's easy.
It comes naturally. That's funny. I like that.
Oh man. Well, this has been great. This has been so much fun. All right. Let me see. I think I just saw Jeff Hamilton was still here. Wow, this is great that he's hanging on. Jeremy Driesen, my buddy that lives on Martha's Vineyard, is asking how much of an influence Gary Chaffee was. And someone asked how long you studied with Alan Dawson. So we'll throw those couple of questions at you.
Yeah, okay, sure. So right out of high school, graduated in 72, went to Berklee, September 1972. And Gary Chaffee was my teacher. He, you get assigned a private instructor. And it was Gary's first year teaching at Berklee. And it was just like a fortuitous event, because he kind of blew my mind, as he did a lot of drummers, because my teacher that I talk about, Billy Flanagan, was a great teacher, but very much out of a tradition, the tradition of reading, sight reading, rudiments, jazz coordination. And Gary Chaffee was working on developing what he called odd groupings, so it was getting familiar with playing groups of 5, groups of 7, groups of 9 in, quintuplets or septuplets, and then also phrasing. You could play the same, rhythms of 5, 7, or 9, or 11, or whatever, in triplets or in 16th notes, or it was kind of mind expanding material. Yeah. And I would literally leave the lesson with a headache sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was great stuff. And he had other, so he was a big influence. He had other really ideas of like how to move on the drum set. So you didn't always move in a typical, start up here and then go down the toms, like different ways of moving on the kit that were creative and interesting. So he was very innovative. So I studied with him for a year, that year. And then the next year I studied like a whole year with Alan Dawson. Now Alan Dawson's lessons were in some ways more related to my original teacher, using the methods of like the syncopation book that Buddy didn't go through.
Yeah.
And the stick control book, but doing it in ways that were very musical. And in fact, like he would have me sing a melody of a jazz standard and then play the material. So it was in form. And I think that was like a beautiful turning point for me, where I got really inside of how to play in form. And then okay, that was an AABA form. So next week, how about an AABC form, or a 12-bar blues, or something where you had to play a tune and identify the form and play your lesson with the form. And sometimes he would play the vibes and I'd play the drums, and so it was technically high level, but it was musically, really informed musically. And then by the third year, I went back to Chaffee, and that's when Vinnie Colaiuta showed up.
Yeah.
So then I spent another year studying again with Gary Chaffee. I did do some other lessons when I was there with some of the other instructors, but they were like timpani lesson and vibes lessons, which after a while I let go of, because it took too much work to really develop those instruments. And I decided I just wanted to focus on the drum set. But a lot of students were like, they do everything, they try to, play all percussion instruments. And that was not unusual in those days. In fact, like while I was a drum student, before I went to Berklee, I had vibes and I played vibes. My last couple years of high school, I played vibes. And I took piano lessons from a teacher in Brockton, Jerry Goschuk. And because it was part of a musical education. Yeah. So I played piano vibes but eventually I just felt like it took so much time, and to be good at it took too much time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I decided I was just going to specialize in the drum set.
That's worked out well. I was going to say, I'm kind of a multi-instrumentalist too. I play, besides drums, tambourine, maracas. So
claves.
Yep.
Excellent.
So, and my friend Rich Farrago asked me to ask you to talk about Drum Fantasy Camp, which is coming up too. And we want to make sure we plug that, because hey, there's Michael Shreve.
Hey, Michael.
Hi, Michael. Wow, everybody. Big hand for Michael Shreve in the house, along with Jeff Hamilton. Wow.
Very cool. From Seattle, living now in Seattle. Well, Drum Fantasy Camp, the origins of it, in a way, it dates back to Dave Weckl and myself doing a lot of drum camps, like we'd both be doing them. And then Dave and I both have Steve Orkin running our websites. He's our webmaster. So, so we had conversations with Steve Orkin about the idea of having a drum camp. And Steve took it on himself really to organize it, it's like one thing to have the ideas, but it's difficult to really make it happen, pull it together and make it happen. But we were, Dave and I were both teaching at a camp in Marktoberdorf, Germany, called Rhythm. It's in Bavaria. A lot of drummers have taught there. And one night after we were teaching, we were just talking about our educational backgrounds. And I talked about going to the Stan Kenton camp, and it turned out Dave went to a Stan Kenton camp. And then Chad Wackerman was with us. And he said he went to the Stan Kenton camp. So we were all talking about like how transformative that experience was. And one of the reasons it was those camps were transformative is because you played music. It wasn't, they weren't drum camps, they were music camps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we decided, you know, so Dave and I were saying, if we did something where, you know, we could have some input on a camp, we'd want a band. We'd want to have a band that the people could play with. And so that's where Drum Fantasy Camp, in a way, is different than a lot of the drum camps, is that there's a rhythm section. And it started out with some of the guys from my band, you know, Vital Information, Baron Brown, Vinny Valentino. And eventually Vinny took over as the musical director. So my guitarist, Vinny Valentino, is the musical director at Drum Fantasy Camp, and he always organizes an amazing band. And so there's, you know, there's great drummers teaching, and then the drummers play with the bands, and then the campers, the students, get to play with the band. So they get to have an experience of playing with high level musicians. And, you know, that's where you really learn about musicianship and really learn how to play music. Because one thing to play the drums, but it's another thing to play music.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's such a great idea.
A focal point. We really try to make that a focal point of the Drum Fantasy Camp experience.
And Steve's been doing it for not quite 20 years, but probably 15 years, if I had to guess.
I think, well, it could be 12. I think 12.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It might be 2007 was the first one.
Okay. No, I remember, you know,
Maybe 12, 13 years.
Yeah, the whole concept. And it's great. It's like you just said, I mean, having the whole idea of playing with other musicians is just, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's what's missing, but there's so much of drummers just playing by themselves, and that's cool. But, you know, we all grew up like playing in bands, and that's, to me, there's nothing better than that, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
And, you know, and the takeaway there is that your best teachers are the musicians that you're playing with. You know, because it's one thing to take lessons and learn how to play your instrument, but you have to, you know, of course, play your instrument in context with the other musicians. So in a way, my best teachers are the other musicians that I've played with, that are giving me direct feedback.
Yeah. Yeah.
What it is that I'm doing that's working, or what it is that I'm doing that's not working. And then you make the adjustments to develop your musicianship.
Yeah. No, that's exact. And Steve just commented and said 2007. So you were right.
2007.
Steve Smith. Yeah. Thank you, Steve Workin.
Yeah, and it's just, well, the other part of it is just the hang. It's like a beautiful hang, and everyone gets inspired just because there's that energy of drumming, you know, music, and it's an all immersive 4 or 5 day experience, and people leave inspired.
That's cool. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I think we should wrap it up because you have to make dinner. What are you making for dinner tonight, by the way? That's someone asked that question.
Yeah, trout.
Trout, nice. Freshly caught today in the lake?
Not in the lake, but so we go to the farmer's market on Saturday. And one of the farms actually, besides having, you know, all kinds of great vegetables and whatnot, they raise trout. and they're already cleaned. They're already gut.
Yeah.
So I have a recipe, you know, and we, you know, so we'll roast some vegetables and then have a couple trout, and then it'll be, and a little rosé.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Rosé, and it'll be our Saturday night trout fish feed.
Yep. Put on some reruns, some Me TV, some. No, I don't know.
We don't get TV here.
You don't? No.
No, I mean, we barely have internet. I have my hotspot. And that's it. So I put on an LP. That's
way hip. That's
yeah.
Now I feel like a total schmuck for suggesting you watch TV.
I'll put on. Here's what I'm going to put on tonight. Don't go away.
Okay,
right?
Let's see. Yeah, this is an added bonus here.
So
Oh, look at that.
So this is a Quincy Jones record, and the drummer is Charlie Persip.
Yes, rest in peace, Charlie.
Yeah, and he just passed. So I want to listen to, and it's a great jazz album. A lot of beautiful playing, nice arranging. Not a lot of arranging. It's like a lot of nice soloing. Paul Chambers on bass, and so we'll groove on that for a while and then see where it takes us.
Yeah, cool, awesome. All right,
Well, Johnny, this has been
let's
totally fun.
This has been great. Hang on for 1 second, Stephen. I'm going to end the broadcast and say goodbye to everybody, and then I'll say goodbye to you in the room. So just hang tight for 1 second. All and right. Just want to thank everybody for watching. Don't forget Wednesday. This big hand for Steve Smith, everybody. A little virtual clapping. Put some clap emojis up, please. Oh, Jeff Hamilton saying Voinier with the trout. He's recommending a white.
Oh, not a rosé.
Not a rosé. You know Jeff. He knows his wines.
He does.
Anyway.
I'm listening to Jeff's album most nights too. Catch Me If You Can. We put that on too.
Oh, dig it. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Good, don't have it on LP though. But
no. But maybe. But I just wanted to let everybody know that Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, September 2nd, Danny Seraphine, a good friend of Steve's and mine, will be here at 2 p.m. Eastern time, right on this channel. So check out Danny, original drummer from Chicago, and that'll be great. And hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. It's been a blast. Steve, thank you so much. Hang on. And
I want to say one thing about Danny, just one.
Yeah, please.
Because I like when I talked about that I did a journey tour, right? And I did a Vital Information first record in 1983, did a journey tour, and then did a Vital Information tour. Okay. Yeah. So I wanted to take a vacation after the journey tour before the Vital Information tour, but I wanted to practice my drums while I was on vacation.
Yeah.
But my wife at the time, Susan, wanted to go to Hawaii. So as it turns out, I talked to a travel agent that somehow knew about Danny Seraphine had a house in Hawaii with a drum set in the house.
I didn't know this.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how I first met Danny. So I said, so if I rent Danny's house, would he let me play his drums? So the travel agent said, I don't know, let's ask him. So I got on the phone.
Yeah.
And he was super cool. And he had this unbelievably awesome home in Kauai, like right on the water.
Yeah.
Totally on the water. And in the basement was his drum set. And he told me, yes, you could shed on my kit. So I rented the place for 2 weeks and I practiced every day on his kit. And then I went on to the Vital Info tour.
That's so cool. What a great story.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention it to him
The other thing I want to thank Danny for is I had dinner with him like shortly before I got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame the year before.
Yeah.
And he took me to school on how to write a speech.
Not like the one he wrote?
Telling me what to make sure you did include. Anyway, I thank Danny for taking me to school on that Rock and Roll Hall of Fame speach. But his is classic. It is classic.
I know. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say.
Yeah. Anyway, well, thanks. Thank you, Johnny. And it's been a great hang.
My pleasure, Steve. Hang on 1 second, and thank you everybody for watching. It's been a blast. And hang on just 1 second, Steve.